Hello, 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 everyone. I am so excited. I feel like it's my birthday. It's not my birthday, but it certainly is the birth of a new an opportunity to learn now in one place, in one publication, and that is the publication of the first ever diversity, equity, and inclusion for dummies book. Hi, I'm Dr. Shirley Davis, and I am so thrilled to be introducing you to this body of knowledge, to this amazing legacy that I believe is going to transform organizations. It's going to impact leaders. It's going to create cultures of inclusion and belonging. And I am so grateful for the opportunity to have had the team at John Wiley and Sons invite me to write this book. It's timely, it's relevant, it's necessary, and this is a key strategic business imperative for all of us. So thank you all for being here. Look, if you will, go tell your friends, go tell your colleagues, go tell your coworkers, tell your boss. They need to join today's launch. We're going to be talking to some of my colleagues and friends about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the state of the field, the state of the work, past, present, and future. And I want to have them be a part of today's conversation. The other thing that's really exciting about today is this is the launch of my LinkedIn Live show, DEI Masterclass. And I'm excited because each week or so, I'm going to be bringing on additional thought leaders talking about all things diversity, equity, and inclusion, leadership, talent management, workforce, and culture transformation. And so we're going to be having some relevant conversations, some deep, provocative conversations, some uncomfortable conversations. But we want to do this as a way to learn more about how we can go deeper, broader, and have greater impact in our organizations. For those of you who don't know me, I have actually been in this work for nearly 30 years. I started out as a human resources professional, and I worked in every area of HR, led training and development, worked in recruiting for 10 years. I also led leadership development and training. I worked in employee relations, total comp and benefits, all of the areas. And then I became a specialist and an expert, becoming a chief diversity and inclusion officer, and been doing that for now nearly 15, 20 years. So I'm excited about this work that we do. I believe it's a calling. It is a special assignment. Not everybody has the temperament. Not everybody has the wherewithal, the stamina, the courage to do this kind of work, but it is important. And I'm telling you right now, it couldn't be a more relevant topic. So today, what we're going to do is I'm going to bring on some of my colleagues, and we're going to talk a little bit more, not only about the book, but we want to provide for you some value, some strategies, some tips, some stories, some examples of how it's being done, how it's being done right, and what are some things we all need to be thinking about, because every one of us, regardless of your title, regardless of your level and experience in an organization, all of us has a responsibility to contribute to building a more equitable society where we have an opportunity to bring our full and most authentic selves to work every day, and where we can ultimately thrive and succeed. So one of the things I want to do, first of all, is thank John Wiley and Sons for, look, this reality is this. They've been around for 30 years, and they have over 2,500, I think it's 2,500 or so books for dummies, right? And we know the Dummies brand. The Dummies brand has always been about helping to make learning easy, helping to provide knowledge and information and understanding for those of us who may not know something, whether it's science for dummies or cooking for dummies or driving for dummies. All of these are areas where we all can say, I need to learn more, right? I am not learned about that. And so that's what this brand is all about. So I want to thank you, Tracy, for reaching out to me and for allowing me this opportunity. I want to thank the entire project team who helped manifest this into today's project, to today's book. Christy, certainly I appreciate you. I appreciate Christina. I appreciate Daryl. I appreciate you, Raven. I just wanted to give you some call outs and thank you. And I also want to thank Smith Publicity, who is also our public relations and who will be helping us to make sure this work gets out all over the world. So the other thing too is I want to acknowledge the contributors in the book. Two of them are here today, and then the other two will be joining at a later date. So you'll be listening and hearing from me there. So without further ado, let me first of all share with you, this is what the book looks like. Yeah, it's not an accident that I look like the book. Look, I'm all about brand alignment. I'm all about brand compatibility. But the book, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Dummies, it has 21 chapters and it is very comprehensive. It touches on everything you want to know as a practitioner, but more so, this book was written for the leader at the line level, supervisor level. It's written for boards of directors. It's written for C-suite executives, those who don't necessarily do this work every day. Many of us, we do this and we understand the importance of it, and we've been doing it long enough. We got a really good handle on how to drive it in our organizations. But this book was written for the leader at the middle to executive board level to help you have a real good roadmap, reference point, and a guidepost for how you implement, support, lead, guide, and drive DEI in your organizations. It is your responsibility as a leader. It is a leadership competency. It is a business strategy. And it's a global reality that we have to make sure that we're building cultures of inclusion and belonging. So that's what this book is all about. And I'm going to give you a couple of sneak previews into the book as well. But I wanted to at least share with you just a few of some of the chapters that we cover in this. And I know a lot of you have pre-ordered it already. I'm excited for you to get the book tomorrow. But actually, I cover in here everything about the demographic shifts and how that's reshaping the world around us, the workforce, the workplace, what's going to happen in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years, and how we need to be readying ourselves as leaders. I talk a bit about how to assess your organization. What do you do with audits, and how do you expose common barriers? How do you measure success? How do you position DEI as an organizational strategic priority? How do you implement it? How do you sustain it? How do you make sure that you're measuring all the things that you're doing well? How do you launch DEI councils? How do you embed it in other areas around the organization, not just in training, not just in HR, not just in recruiting, but how do you embed it in every other area? So there is a lot of great tools, strategies, best practices, checklists, assessments. It's a practical guide for you. So that's my plug for the book. I'm really excited about having the opportunity to have something now that can be sort of our roadmap. So without further ado, let me introduce who my special guests are today, my colleagues, really my brothers and my sisters. The first special guest is Wendy Lewis. And Wendy is the founder and the creator of Allyship. Allyship. Allyship is a progressive and seismic platform for advocacy and sustainable equity. She is known for shifting the transactional to the transformative and considers herself an evangelist for life, liberty, and the pursuit of equity. Her company, Wendy Lewis, LLC, is a diversity, equity, and inclusion practice firm where focus is diverse, where diversity is inclusion, inclusion is diversity, and equity matters more. Additionally, Wendy is the former head, and she's retired now, former head of diversity, equity, and inclusion for McDonald's Worldwide, as well as the former senior vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Major League Baseball. So she has been around for a while. She is our pioneer. She has helped us in so many and mentored us. And so I'm thrilled to have her. But more importantly, Wendy was one that I worked with in reviewing the book. So as I wrote chapters, I needed an outside expert, an objective ear, and someone who could come back through all of my work, all of my manuscripts, and say, okay, you need to add this, or hey, I like this, or make sure you reposition that. So she was the one that provided some of the additional review. So welcome, 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 Wendy. We're glad to have you here. The other thing I want to say about Wendy is also one of the newest inductees in the inaugural Diversity Inclusion Magazine's Hall of Fame. I happen to be on there with her. Here's Wendy right here. And I happen to be one of those as well. So again, recognizing that she is also a Hall of Famer, what we call a diversity champion in our space. Our second special guest, which I am so thrilled to have here today, is Eric Peterson. Eric Peterson, MSOD, is a senior consultant right now with Cook Ross. He is a recognized facilitator and educator in the diversity and inclusion space with nearly 20 years of experience in unconscious bias, diversity and inclusion, learning strategies, and organizational development. Some of you may know Eric has been my partner, and I won't say crime, but my partner in time when I was working at the Society for Human Resource Management. And together we made some transformational impact to the field, to the profession, and to the Society for Human Resource Management. He was there with me for over 5 years, and together he and I were unstoppable. And before he came to SHRM, he was also at Booz Allen Hamilton, working there as a member of their diversity team. So again, I come with an amazing cadre of experts and thought leaders for today. He's also the recent author, so we can add that to his title, the recent author of the new book, Loyalty, Love, and Vermouth. I'm excited about it. And he was a significant contributor to the book. So when I got asked to write it, I knew I couldn't do it by myself, because I'm a big believer that success comes with numbers. It comes with the numbers of people that you engage with, the types of expertise that you have in your network, and I leverage my network. So Eric helped me to also contribute some of the thought leadership in this book, and I'm so thrilled and excited that he was a part of this legacy. So thank you, Eric, for being here. And then last but not least, my dear friend, Mr. Tyrone Studemeyer, who is now nationally recognized executive. He's experienced in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. His unique talent creates extraordinary strategic networking opportunities for the benefit of individuals and organizations. Tyrone has a deep expertise in D&I, has been doing this for nearly 30 years, and he works in highly productive ways with officers, CEOs, executive leadership teams, and line leaders as well. But ultimately, right now, he is the global head of inclusion, diversity, and equity at Hyatt Worldwide. And I'm so thrilled to have all of these amazing leaders. So you're going to have an opportunity today to hear from us, but also we want to hear from you. What are your questions? What are some of your comments? What are some of your takeaways? We want to hear that. So thank you all, my friends, my dear brothers and sisters, for being here. Say hello to everyone. I'm seeing a wave.
Welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you're viewing this video.
Absolutely. Good. So here's some of the things that we want to hit on today. We know that there's a lot going on as we think about workforce 2022. Here we are. Can you believe it? I remember like 10 years ago, I used to say workforce 2020. And then I'd say workforce 2030. But my God, doesn't it feel like it's just right around the corner, and we blink again and it'll be 2025 and then 2030. So as we think about workforce 2020, what are some trends that you're seeing right now that we need to be really aware of as leaders, not just practitioners, but today we're going to talk to leaders. We're going to talk to those line supervisors. We're going to talk to executives, C-suite leaders, and board members who really want to know more about DE&I. So what do you see as some of the trends that we need to be aware of today and beyond? Eric, can we start with you?
Sure. So happy to be here, first of all, Dr. Shirley, and so happy to be working with you yet again. This is a partnership that will not die, nor do I ever want it to. So thanks so much for having me. I would say right now what I'm noticing, what's really real for me, is that folks have lost their patience. We've said for years with this work that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And I think that some folks have said, yeah, but you still got to run. I mean, we want action. We want, things to happen. I read just yesterday that in this great resignation, it's actually non-white employees are outpacing white employees in those who are quitting their jobs because they don't want to put up with the microaggressions and the stalled career growth and all the other, they've had enough. And, it's interesting. It took a pandemic for us to finally realize that folks could work from home. And I think that's just simply because people didn't trust people to work from home. And but the trust has to be reciprocal, folks. Right now, there's folks who are working for you and they don't trust you very much either. And perhaps with some good reason, they haven't seen enough action from people on the top to actually make this work. And we've got to speed up what we're doing. What really is real for me that in this next decade, it's got to be about results. A demonstrated commitment is just no longer enough. And that's really what I'm seeing going forward.
Thanks so much. Wendy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. And I just have to say happy true year to you and everyone else as you have taught me. And also just want to share with everyone, happy book birthday. Such a work of art, as you are. Um, this is a great question because it reminds me of back in the day, as we would say, two phrases that truly have come to pass. One is "power to the people," and the other one I think of is "the chickens, have come home to roost."
Roost.
And the reality is, those have gone from being slogans and aspirational and inspirational sayings, and even protests, positions, and marches. And the reality is, today's CEOs must recognize it's power to the people. People are empowered. They want to settle for no less than being empowered. People have gone from being, fearful and uncertain about taking risks to just stone authentic. And I think is the chicken that has come home to roost. Particularly those of us as the DI leaders, we have been welcoming and embracing and encouraging people to bring your authentic self to work, right? So people are being their authentic selves, and sometimes that includes, I'm not coming back to that place. People are not choosing not to work. People are choosing to not be in toxic and negative institutions.
That's right.
People right now have become so clear on what the truth is and is not. And I think the leaders and practitioners going forward are going to have to become extraordinarily emotionally intelligent and just respect the place where we're at today.
That's right. Thank you, Wendy. And Tyrone.
Dr. Shirley Davis, I have to echo Wendy's comments. Happy birthday. This is a wonderful opportunity, and I'm privileged and honored to join you on this journey. Book for Dummies, D&I for Dummies, for Dummies. It's amazing body of work that you've done. As you know, I am very much leaning towards the analytics and the data. And the analytics of data is not in our favors. As we look at the data, we've been talking about this for a decade, that by 2025, the minority will be the majority. You got 80 million baby boomers transition out of the workforce. The next generation of workers are 40 million. August of 2021, 6.7 million people left their current employer.
Yep.
In the middle of the pandemic. So the data is not on anybody's side. This is a true tsunami and race and war on talent that we've never seen before in any of our lifetimes. Mm-hmm. So the strategies and what we put in place today from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective is critical to the business. In the financial world, they say nothing speaks louder than zero. In our world, the data doesn't lie, right? It tells a story. Following that data to help us to understand what solutions we need to put in place to achieve success in the workforce, the workplace, and the marketplace is critical. Companies will not survive. I think it was Elaine Chao, when she was in the administration, Secretary of Labor, said that by 2025, most companies will defunct because they will not be able to retain talent. She had forecast that a decade ago or so, if I'm not mistaken. So again, the data tells a story. How do we follow the data? How do we look at now diversity, equity, inclusion, and well-being? This pandemic has put our companies in a very peculiar space. And health and wellness is one of the top initiatives that people have to focus on for their employees. I heard that Eric talked about trust. To say that I just trust you to work from home, and I've been doing this now almost 3 years, is taboo. We need to figure out how we look at words and languages and processes and procedures that's going to be more inclusive and equitable for all. Mm-hmm. One of the things we do at Hyatt is you talk about, to plan your day. Plan your day allows you to work in the office, allows you to work at home, to work in the lobby of a hotel, to sit in your backyard. That is the type of disruption that has happened, that we have to look for just disruptive systems and processes to achieve an equitable environment for all.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm seeing some really awesome comments in the chat. For example, I see one person says employees have so much information at their fingertips. Not only can they bring their authentic selves to work, but they can also come with information that supports them and their reasons for asking for, again, a more open and engaging workplace. They know where the options are. Someone else says great comments. Congratulations on the book. Someone else says, hello. They're glad to see some of us. Can you scroll down a little bit more? I want to see some of the previous chats, so I didn't want to miss any of those. Some others where I see too, a demonstrated commitment is just not longer enough. Well stated, Eric. Good. So thank you. There's a lot of great comments. Please continue to chat. Everyone else is saying hello. They're excited to see all of you. Thanks. Didn't know if there's a place where we can order the book. Great. Some additional things I wanted to hit on that's in the book as well is what the first chapter, or I should say the second chapter, is on exploring key demographic trends. And we've already hit on some of those, recognizing that the workforce is becoming much more diverse, more global, more multicultural, multi-generational. And we see neurodiversity. We see people with different disabilities. We see people with different thinking, different backgrounds, different culture, different language. And that's a reality that leaders are going to have to work around and work within to be able to, as Wendy said, create a culture where people want to come and work and not leave because it's toxic. People don't leave bad jobs. They leave bad leaders and toxic cultures, right? That's the reality. Some of the others, just real quickly to hit on, is as we talk about workforce predictions 2030 and beyond, is that our world is rapidly also getting older. So according to the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, people 65 and older are projected to reach 1.5 billion by 2050. The other one is artificial intelligence. We're talking a lot more about AI. And why does that play into the role of DE&I, right? Artificial intelligence may replace jobs and humans once held and create jobs that didn't exist today. That and I also saw too somewhere that 80% of the new jobs that are going to be created in the future don't even exist right now. I think Cisco Systems said that. Also, employers may recruit global contract-based workers instead of employing full-time workers. So we're seeing a lot more of that as well. And traditional retirement will peter out as workers continue working as long as they can. So you might be 75, 78, 80, and 85 still in the workplace, working alongside someone who's 17, 18, and 19 years old, who might be your supervisor. So we have to be willing to and understanding that there's a shift in the ways that we'll be working and leading together. And there's a number of others as well. One of them, driverless cars may again continue to increase faster. So there's some definite realities in there. And it goes on and on and on about personalities and neurodiversity, but recognizing our world is changing. Let me get to this second one. And if there's any questions, I also want you to put in. Working from home is still being questioned when it has been proven that you can do so. Absolutely. One of the other things I think is important is that we look at some of the challenges that leaders, including board of directors, C-suite executives, as well as our line supervisors, that they're facing a lot of challenges, as we look at these pandemics. I don't just say the pandemic, it's pandemics with an S on it, right? Also, we see a lot of international, not just national cries, but international cries for greater equity and greater inclusion and greater justice following, yes, the murder of George Floyd and just some other things that we've seen as a result of the pandemic, some of the inequities that came out and the injustices that are reaping a lot of conversations. What can companies do better? And where did companies miss the mark? So I don't have to hear from all three of you because I know in a matter of time, I want to try and get more questions in. But where have companies done really well through navigating through all of this? But where have companies missed the mark?
Let me just start by saying, just very simple, listen, and actively listening. We're not, as leaders, we have a tendency to hear but not listen. And we're always looking for the response. When someone comes to an issue, I got to get to a solution. Sometimes there's not a solution right then. So actively listening and helping to understand and actively asking questions to be able to get to the root cause of why and what we can do differently. Mm-hmm. I believe that empathy plus action equals care. Yes. We have to show that.
Say that again, Tyrone. Put that in. Somebody chat that. That was good. That's tweetable.
Empathy plus action equals care. People want to see the actions that you're taking to care for me, to be my best.
Yes.
Right. So we have to think about that. I think of the things that we're missing. We want leaders. If you want leaders to people to lead, you have to lead by example. You have to show. Mm-hmm. Right. We have to be more vulnerable as leaders than we've ever been before, especially in the environment that we're in with people trying to, in the sandwich. We have 5 generations in the workforce. And the way that we get work done is going to be very different based upon our worldview. Traditionalists, baby boomers, Xers, Ys, millennials, and they're all approach this very differently, right? And so we look at this not from a race and gender perspective, but from a cultural perspective.
That's right.
Right, because you went from Me Too movement, Black Lives Matters, Asian hate, right? The hate against the pride community. And the aging workforce is global. Then one of the issues outside the United States, particularly in Asia and in India, is the aging population.
That's right.
So that following the data, listening, being vulnerable, seeking to understand, and in all of this, assuming positive intent, there must be a reason why Eric is behaving this way. It must be a reason why Wendy is pushing us in this direction, as opposed to the judgment and the microaggression that we place on women and people of color in the workplace.
Yes.
Shirley, if I could add, particularly the reactions to the murder of George Floyd worldwide, was an overwhelming response to do something. And it ended up being a matter of a lot of dollars and cents. I mean, good cents, not pennies.
Dollars and good cents. I love that.
Dollars and good cents. And the reality is, I think the honest perspective on that is, all that really stood to do was be a marker of where you should have been all along. Whatever companies and organizations committed to do as a reaction to that, to me says, well, that's where you should have been all along. Right. So don't do a whole lot of pronouncement of what you're doing because of that, as much as we are now making this our new starting point. That's right. And get real honest about that, and willing to Tyrone's point, make those metrics and make that data not only responsible, but transparent, and be much more honorable about these intentions. Because, what Eric was saying, to me, that's what real sustainability is. I would say that is the major gap. That's been the major problem. Mm-hmm. And all of us as well. We built a lot of stuff over the last 20 and 30 years, right? We pushed a lot of stuff. We created a lot of stuff. We engineered a lot of stuff. Unfortunately, too many of it didn't last. It wasn't built for sustainability. It was built in reaction to, or to address crisis or prevention, but it wasn't built for sustainability. And I think that's the reaction, the reason that we have to go forward in a very, very different and definitive way.
If I may build on what he just said, during the murder and death of George Floyd, companies either reacted or responded.
Yes, that's good.
Two very different things.
They either reacted or responded. Yes. Say more about that,
right? So in reactive mode, people went out and says, we're going to give money to United Negro College Fund. We're going to promote more blacks on television. We're going to have our advertising changing. Those are reactions, right? Yes. The response was, let's think about what we're doing. Let's look at the available labor market and look at the internal labor market, and maybe put goals in place to look at representation, to get women and people of color on corporate boards and in senior executive roles. How do we help develop them? Explain to people what's the difference between equity versus equality. Equality says we give everybody the same thing. Equity says we meet people where they are and give them the tools to be successful. We have to look at those things. You have to take an evaluation of your work in the workplace, your talent acquisition strategy, your talent development strategy, how you're going to put things in place to make sure that people who need the support to move ahead will be there. Strategies such as making sure that 80% of your diverse state candidates are diverse, with a focus on Blacks, Latinos, and Asians. You have to be that deliberate. Years ago, I think we talked about, organic, let it happen, let them find their way. We have to be more prescriptive now than we've ever been as practitioners to say, do this, and this is what you're going to get, right? Yep. Based upon the data. So let the data lead you where you're going, making sure that you're looking at the underserved communities and making sure that you're going into, we have more than millions of unemployed youth. How we go after that unemployed youth is going to be very different than what we did 50 years ago.
That's right.
People have choices that they never had before that you're now competing with. So how you show up in the communities is going to be critical. So people went after with dollars and cents, but not strategy, relationships, engagement, support, and examples. This year, people are going to have to show the efforts of the dollars that they committed to these organizations. And with social media in place, it's in your forefront. It happens right away. It's tweetable moments. Hyatt did this, American Airlines did this, United Airlines did this. It's out there. So the response time is very different than it was 50 years ago.
Good. Now, I want to stop for a second because I know that there's a lot of conversations going on in the chat room as well. If you can bring it down a little bit, I want to read a few of them. And I know that there was a question that was posted by Howard Wallach, and I want to read that. The question is, and then I'm going to read a few of these chats. So panel, be thinking about the response. The question is the resistance to work at home in part due to generationally different perspectives on what work means? The nature of work has changed, but the attitudes towards it still lag. So be thinking about that. Howard, great to see you, sending you hugs. He's a former colleague of ours at SHRM. Love, love, love seeing you here. Some of the other comments that I'm seeing online as well, again, is empathy plus action plus care. I love that, equals care. And then leaders need to listen. They're good at hearing, but they need to listen to the emotional need behind it. That's great. Someone else says, great session. How do you suggest businesses navigate the challenges that arise when what is right in terms of DEI and basic human rights goes against laws and governmental policies in the country for which that country operates? So that's another good one as well. Who wants to first, and we'll get to Neeses in just a second. Hold that one up and bring it up. Who wants to answer Howard Wallach's question as well about why people are resistant to it?
You know, I'll go back to the generational piece, is that the way traditionalists were trained to do work and baby boomers were, you got to come early, you got to stay late, work till you get the job done. I got to see, touch, and feel. The millennials are saying, I can do my job sitting in the middle of Lake Michigan, right? As long as I get the job done, that's all you should be concerned with, right? So generationally, that's going to be just as disruptive in this country as I believe race is. Because how we're taught to get work done is going to be different. That's why I really love the work with Franz Trampenaz and Charles Hammond Turner, writing the ways of culture of how we get work done. It's our culture, beliefs, and backgrounds that informs our decisions on how we make decisions, resolve conflicts, right? So I think it's generation is going to be an issue we're going to have to look at and listen and learn. Some people cannot. I'm an extroverted person. I thrive off of people. I want to touch, see, feel, look at it. But someone else might say, I can get my job done. I don't have to talk to anyone. I can respond through messaging. I can respond through texting. I can respond through email. I've given you what you need. We have to be receptive to that if we're going to be inclusive for all and to be able to harness the next generation of leaders. So I think generationally, we're going to have to look at it very differently and try to make sure that we can find a balance. At Hyatt, we talk about, plan your day. Planning your day and what you need to do, whether you come in the office or not, whether you spend time with your CEO or your direct leader or not. The other thing is emotionally is that we do check-ins. And for the first 15 minutes, how are you doing? Not work. How do you feel? What can I do? Conversations, those check-in conversations are vital. People are leaving their employer because they're not concerned about their well-being or concerned about the environment that they're sitting in or concerned about how they feel. This is emotional. It's an emotional time.
Thank you, and I know you're really, this is some good information. Wendy, you were going to jump on. I know Eric had one too. And if we can, let's try to now put it into like a 1-minute snippet if we can, because I know we've got a number of other comments and questions as well. Wendy and then Eric.
I just wanted to add to that. And Eric, this may lean into the direction you may or may not be going. But we also have to keep in mind that for a lot of us, particularly, the whole spectrum of diversity in terms of global diversity, of people of color and generational issues and disabilities and indigenous people and so forth, how it has been such an asset and an expectation that we are in the room. I mean, we have fought for generations, centuries to be in the room. And so the reality is this remote environment for some folks is a real challenge and some insecurity on how am I going to be perceived and valued when we are no longer in those rooms? Because Eric, to the work that you're doing when it comes to biases and emotional intelligence and I won't even say unconscious bias, but bias, there was a lot to be said about seeing people in the flesh. But so when we're on these screens, I can just know from experience and observations, folks get in that real sort of homogeneous lane and they kind of, get comfort in what they're used to. They're also seeing people in very discreet and intimate spaces and places. And so I think there's a whole big challenge around that a lot of leaders and organizations are not prepared to address. And by not addressing that, I think we're going to miss what an opportunity this actually can be.
Yeah,
thanks, you're absolutely right. Eric?
Yeah, real quick in response to what Wendy just said, yes, I absolutely agree. And the work is always so complex, right? Because I'm also hearing from just as many people who were traditionally marginalized at work that working remotely just frees them up from all of these microaggressions that they didn't even realize they were dealing with every day. But suddenly being freed from those is remarkable. And, going back to what Tyrone was saying, even what he was saying, 2 questions ago, this idea of listen, I absolutely agree and would only add also be prepared to believe people when they speak. Because a lot of times we listen and we hear, oh, that's true for you, but that's not really true, because it challenges perhaps what they think about themselves. If you are experiencing racism, that makes me a racist, because we center ourselves in all of our conversations. And I think that's just a human thing that most of us do. We make it about ourselves first, but we really have to listen to say, okay, you might not, I don't have to take any of this in as a judgment against me, but I do have to truly believe that what you're saying about yourself is true for you. And so when we're working across generations and we define work in different ways, that has to be part of it as well. What has been true for you your entire life need not be true for a new generation of folks who are coming in. And it sounds really, really difficult. And really, truly, it's listen and believe people. It's not, as we say, rocket science, but emotionally, it can be very challenging work for leaders to do.
Yeah. Awesome. We've got another question. Let's put the other one up too. I think it was from Sionice. I want to make sure we don't miss her question as well. Can we put that one back up on the screen, or either scroll back down to it? I want to say it. So great session. How do you suggest businesses navigate the challenges that arise when what is right in terms of DE&I and basic human rights goes against the laws and the governmental policies in the country from which the country operates?
Yeah, I would throw
you, and again, keep it to 1 minute.
A real example for me is the question becomes, and I'd love for Sionice to say more if she would like to, is it that doing the right thing is illegal in your country, or simply that the laws of your country don't respect individuals, and there's nothing illegal with showing them that respect in the workplace? And the example I go back to is the way that organizations all over America, before LGBT people were able to enjoy marriage equality, was partner benefits were just being, brought out by the organization. There was nothing in the law that said you had to respect a same-gender marriage, but there was nothing in the law that said you couldn't. And so organizations who decided that they valued these employees and wanted to show them that they respected them offered those benefits so that they could feel like they were on an equal footing with their heterosexual peers.
Good.
I think Eric makes a great point to observe, is it law or is it culture? And if you're coming from a business perspective, for us, we know it's the same thing. As a matter of fact, businesses tend to probably be more intimidated by the culture of the country or the continent than they do the actual laws. My example of that is something that I still find pretty profound and almost just overwhelming that it is current day. In the Netherlands, in Belgium, they still have this practice of black peat. And if you're not familiar with it, Google Zwarte Piet is the way it's actually said there. But traditionally, there's this caricature that is beloved and is a part of the Christmas tradition and holiday. And for us, as soon as you see it, you're going to recognize blackface. I mean, the Caucasian folks painting themselves black, painting their lips red, wearing an Afro type wig with huge gold earrings. And there's a whole story behind that. That is such a provocative point of view. So it's very much the culture. And they've tried to address it from a legalistic standpoint and just really having problems with it. So it's an evolving thing, but that's a case that was a matter of culture and not necessarily law. But now it is actually starting to go into a legalistic
and then two are sort of overlapping together.
Yeah.
Can I just add that, just real brief? Culture
real
will eat
brief,
strategy.
Tyrone, because Tyrone's so passionate about this.
Culture will eat strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Pick your meal.
Yeah. Yes, it will. Your culture will eat your strategy. So no matter how deep and broad and comprehensive and awesome your strategy is, if your culture is toxic, if it's not psychologically safe for people to speak and to be themselves, to bring their authentic self to work every day, to do their best work and to feel like they have opportunities, you're right. Your culture will trump that every time. No pun intended. Okay. So a couple of other comments I want to bring up too that are in the chat box. Thank you so much for all the great chats. Can you go back down a little bit? I want to read a few of those that were really good. One says, thank you, Wendy, for mentioning that Indigenous people need to be included in the conversation. We don't hear that enough, even in the realm of DEI. Networks and FaceTime are so important for opportunities, stretch assignments, and promotions. Good point about being in the room. Tyrone nailed it. Trust in technology is a part of it as well. Okay, and then go back down. I saw another one too that was really good. Go back down to the bottom. I think I read most of those. And then someone, here it is. As an executive career coach, I'm seeing an uncanny amount of leaders seeking to pivot into DE&I. I have my own feelings about these actions. However, I'd like to hear why you think this may be attractive to this audience or attracting this audience. I'm saying an uncanny amount of leaders seeking to pivot into DE&I. Yeah, I've seen a lot of that too. And again, says, I have my own feelings about these. However, I'd like to hear why you think this may be attracting this audience. A couple of reasons. Look, I'm a speaker, I'm a consultant, and I've seen a number of people over the last couple of years that as soon as the hot topic was DE&I, and certainly the whole world was focusing on it more, it became a lucrative as well as an important and significant conversation to have. So you have to check your motives and your intentions as to why you want to get into this work. And I can tell you, some of my speaker friends came to me and said, hey, train me, teach me everything I need to know about DE&I in the next couple of weeks so I can offer this. And I said to them, if you weren't doing it before the pandemic, don't start now, because this is not the time to go into an organization or to share with people a very shallow amount of what you know. Share your stories. That's all good. But this work requires strategies, deep thinking. It requires you to have a business acumen, a lot of experience. You got to have rolled up your sleeve. This work is not about you reading a book and reading one research study, and now you done hung out your shingle. This is work that comes from those of us who have been out on the front lines, done the work, and we've got the stripes and the wounds to be able to show that this work isn't easy. And this isn't something that you want to get into because you want to make a lot of money. You want to make a lot of impact. Does that hit that? Okay. All right. I'm some amens in the okay, good. Here's another one I want to hit on too. And if that was is that what you were thinking? Jacqueline, please let me know if that what you were thinking as well too. But it's an important work, but it's not cut out for everybody. And so you have to vet this field just like you vet CPAs, just like you vet architects, just like you vet engineers. People need to have learning, education, and experience in order to truly be able to be out there on the front line with this. Here's another question that I wanted us to think about. And this one comes up, especially now since we're living in a day and age where there's so many sensitivities around language and words. Some people may take offense even to the title of Dummies because of the word dummies in the book, right? It's been around for nearly 30 years, but some people may take offense to that. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how do you address the fact that, yes, we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and in the same phrase, we're saying for dummies. How would you respond to that?
Shirley, I think one of the main things that we suffer from right now is lack of education. It has cost us tremendously, as a country and as a culture and just as a worldwide population. Like someone mentioned that even in the DEI space, we are the best in the world at doing this, but we have left out of the perspective indigenous people, and we've left out of the conversation at the proper level people with disabilities and other types of characteristics.
Yeah.
And so when I think of the word dummies, I mean, rather than take offense in any way, there needs to be an opportunity for education around why that's a problem or why that is or is not a problem. In no way should the word dummy insinuate anything to anyone intentionally. But I say that with understanding appreciation for the education of what that may have meant and represented to people and cost pain for people behind that. But now is the time to declare why it is most appropriate for what you have delivered this piece of work. So rather than, I think, run away and avoid some historically what have been characteristics of what is right and wrong, I think it's a time for us to do a much deeper dive and do a much fuller and broader education on what it is, what's the source, what's been the experience, because we are just now finding out foundationally true histories of true people who make up this world. One of the things that I found so revealing for this particular Christmas holiday is how so much has hit the fan about the religious perspective of Christmas and not. And Thanksgiving here in America was a real firestorm this year, with Indigenous and Indian people declaring that is not a day of celebration for us necessarily. So the reality is, I think a lot of this is going to be a matter of miseducation and us correcting things around language and respecting the sensitivities around it. But let's get better informed and become more culturally competent people.
Good. Thanks, Wendy.
One of my mantras always has been that good intent does not make up for bad impact. That if your actions or words cause a negative impact, your good intentions do not necessarily cancel that out. And yet, I do think that as we become very, very sensitive around the way that we use language, someone's intent can be a really important piece of context. And so realizing that the Dummies brand is decades old and that the people who crafted this were probably doing something so that somebody could self-deprecatingly buy a book, calling themselves a dummy, really not using that word, outwardly towards anybody else. I think that has to be taken into context. I think that if Wiley were probably, launching this series today, they would call it DEI 101 or DEI for beginners or something like that. Things which were funny 30 years ago are less funny to people today. And I think that the intention behind the words that we use, while it's not the sole answer and it's never going to say that it dilutes impact completely, I do think we can pay attention to that as an important piece of context.
Great. I had another question come up in the chat box. If you can scroll back down, someone asked a question, what's the proper way? Go back up. What's the proper way for entry into this space, right? So someone wants to kind of know, how do they get into this space if they are genuinely interested? One says, I'm a young professional and I'm coming from a social cognitive neuropsychology with an emphasis in race, class, and gender. So what would we tell them about how to transition into this DEI space?
There are as many stories.
First and foremost, buy the book and read it.
I heard Eric,
ahead,
and then Tyrone, you can finish on that one.
I would just say there are as many stories about how we got into this as there are practitioners who do this work. The one thing I don't think has changed is get to know the community. This is one industry where, I think that people, I would imagine that Tyrone would sit down with the CDOs of every hotel chain that he is in competition with and trade strategies if all of them thought that would be beneficial to the people in their organizations. The way that competition works elsewhere simply doesn't work that way among DEI practitioners. And the one thing that has not changed in 2 decades for me is get to know people, build those relationships. They will bear fruit, and you will be able to find your way in if this is something you're truly passionate about.
Tyrone, you were going to
just
piggyback
build
on that.
Just build on that and just say, one, buy the book. Take the master classes, enroll into sessions, benchmark and share best practices, join a DBRG, work for a not-for-profit organization that's opposite of you. Read, study, right, as much as you possibly can, because culture is evolving, it's changing. We define culture as a behavior interpretation of how a community lives out its values to thrive and strive. Understand those values, and then those interpretations of those values is really the work that you have to do, and it takes years. You just can't decide, I read this book and now I want to lead this organization. Understand how the company makes money. How does the company grow? Where's talent coming from? How to develop talent. Dr. Shirley opened up with her comments about her journey in HR. Those are valid things that makes her a thought leader and an author today. It doesn't come overnight.
It does, and I appreciate you saying that too, Tyrone, about the education piece of it. And then, yes, it's about doing a lot of reading. It's about, like Eric said, getting the right people around you, and even being selective in what kind of education you're getting, because everyone's out there hanging a shingle. And sometimes people are teaching something that they read about and heard about, but haven't been about. And so you want to make sure that you're looking at who are the facilitators, who are the moderators, who's actually providing you that information. And if they've never held a title of diversity officer and been able to really do that work, then you want to be careful about engaging, unless you just want surface knowledge. If you want a depth of knowledge, then you need to go with those people who are truly rolled up their sleeves and got the t-shirt, the hat, and the shoes. Wendy, I know you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add and do a deep dive, follow the current events and just go deeper than the headlines. I say COVID and all kind of things come to anyone's mind. But look, you say COVID and what has been from a DEI perspective, the impact to Asian people, Asian Americans and Asian people worldwide. You say COVID today and what has been the impact right now to South Africa and African people and around the continent? What has been our response to those people in both ways? So, understand the craft itself, but also I really have always seen my brothers and sisters in this work as cultural anthropologists. You got to really find out what's going on around here and be willing to get to the deeper levels. And also, what is the footprint of your organization who actually is in those situations? Some of us work for organizations or have that are so caustic and have so much causality with what are some current outcomes, which can also be the heroes of the day, the heroes and sheroes. So, take a look at what's going on out here and how this work can help you be a real leader around the solutions.
Excellent. Excellent. A couple of other questions, and we got some great comments. When we talk about polarization, and I would say that we are more polarized now than we've ever been. We're, quite divided politically, socially, economically, religiously. And so it's not just only on, whether or not you voted for a certain person or not. But let's talk quickly about polarization in DE&I. When we think about this too, and we see that it's grown even more divided, what are some of the things that you think about when we talk about polarization that we can do to help bridge this gap, to build a bridge so that we can, not be so divided and so polarized? Thoughts there?
I'm about to say this, but I think we'd sometimes need to lean on the business case. I was hoping we'd put the business case for D&I to bed by 2020, and just realize that this is a way
for me, Eric,
as human beings, But the truth is, when you speak about DEI and someone accuses you of having a liberal agenda, you need to be able to show them, I'm trying to help you succeed as an organization. And that, and I believe that you can be a bigger success if you value all people and if you attract anyone with the talent who can help you move forward. I don't enjoy the fact that I'm saying that, but I do think that in these increased polarizations, this increased time of polarization when, getting a vaccine that can save your life is a political act, and it should not be. But this is where we are. And so we do need to learn to speak the language that will resonate on the other side.
Shirley, I just want to add, to me, polarization equals growing pain. And we are, in a major way.
Wait a minute. That was a good nugget. That's tweetable. Polarization equals growing pain. Growing pains.
And it's necessary. It's necessary. It is birth. It always hurts. It's always messy. But at the end, God willing, there is joy. I mean, it's just the times that we are in. I think the truth is being made free and being made clear. And that is a painful process. And really that, why I created and crafted Ally Shift. Because for the people in the room that have been claiming to embrace this, whether they're DEI or not, but just really have an ability and aptitude and a commitment towards people, we got to get busy. And we got to go from engagement to real advocacy to actual activism. Yes. And yes, there is going to be an other side, and it's getting loud and it's getting ugly. But what people have been doing covert and quietly and discreetly has been silent, but even uglier. So the reality is, I just think these are the times that we are in. And I think we're going to have to pursue and persevere the truth.
Yeah. One of the things, too, is we talk about how do we do more in our organizations. We also have to talk about how do we measure success. We hit on it a little bit earlier about how important it is in our organizations that we talked about culture, eating strategy for lunch, at breakfast and dinner. But we also talked about the important role of leaders. How do we measure success when leaders have been committed and engaged and they've implemented, some of this DE&I work and they've lived the values of DE&I? How do we measure this? And Tyrone, I'm going to come to you because I'm really pleased to have been working with you for a number of years, particularly the amazing transformational work you've been doing at at Hyatt Worldwide. How are you measuring this? And talk just real quickly about how your CEO has been really engaged in this. And hold that thought. So the other thing too is, as we talk about measurements, I want all of us in the studio as well as in the virtual space to think about how are you truly then helping to show your leaders in the organizations that this work not only is important and necessary, but it has a real substantial impact to their bottom line, but also to their long-term success and to their role and effectiveness as a leader. A lot of the work that we do, and I want to hear from Tyrone in just a second, a lot of the work that we do has been measuring around what we call global diversity, equity, and inclusion benchmarks. But I find that too many people in our space don't know about it. But it's a wonderful, wonderful tool and resource for us to be able to use. I was looking for it in the book because we do a lot of organizational assessments. We do audits. We do inclusion and engagement surveys. We do focus groups. We do document reviews. And our team looks at all of the things, policy, strategies. We look at their procedures, their practices, and we want to understand how are they, one, position, what's your current state, but what do you need to do to make substantive, long-term, sustainable impact? And that's what the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion benchmarks do for us. And I would encourage you, especially on page 100 in the book, when you get it tomorrow, if for some of you who have pre-ordered, the Global Diversity and Inclusion benchmarks, which is a great tool. You can Google it as well. I happen to be one of the thought leaders who have been working on this for the last couple of years. We just rolled out a brand new one. It's free as a resource, but most of us don't know that this is a great measuring tool, a benchmark for us to say, here's a baseline of what you should be doing, but here are some standards for how you can increase your effectiveness. And we've actually got 112 global experts who participated in identifying some of those metrics. So now I want to tell Tyrone to talk to us about how you have actually implemented and seen some of the measures of success truly come into fruition with what you've been doing at Hyatt for the last 5-6 years.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. And I would start it, Hyatt is a purpose-driven organization. Our purpose is to care for people to be their best. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is the manifestation of our purpose. Having a leader that lives, breathes, and speaks that is true to our success. I could have not asked for a better leader to lead the charge. He is the chair of our Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. I am the co-chair. Each of his direct reports are executive sponsors for our diversity business resource groups who are opposite of the groups. We have 2 white men, heterosexual white men, leading our Black DBRG. We have 2 heterosexual white women leading our Pride DBRG, and it goes on. They meet and talk about their responsibilities to lead these groups to build a place of inclusion for all. We work collectively, communicate collectively, do business collectively. We've now taken and focused on the B. We're driving revenue by these 8 different diversity business resource groups that matters. We have conversations with these groups to talk about vendors and how we bring vendors into our organization to improve the conditions. He leads that, and it's on his agenda and one of his strategic priorities that's at the top. This didn't just start because of the murder of George Floyd. This has been going on for 7 years for us, 8 years. So our journey has been phenomenal. He leads with this. He exemplifies it. And when the murder of Jeff and George Floyd, he made it very clear. We support Black Lives Matters, and if you don't, we invite you to leave. That is courageous. He had courage and curious enough to learn to move the organization. And that's the type of leaders that he's been vulnerable. We have one-on-one conversations and things he don't understand. He's seeking to better understand that. And he shares a lot. He holds himself accountable. And from a numbers perspective, he's a number major, a master in numbers. So when we talked about goals, he wanted to make sure these goals were attainable, reachable, but also that they made sense for the business. And when things get, he has no problem picking the phone call and asking people, why did you make that decision? What could be done differently? How can we help them has been his mantra, along with our Chief Human Resource Officer, Malika Myers, always, how do we help them? How do we meet them where they are, give them tools to be successful? When you have 2 leaders at the top of the house moving that, and at the bottom where you have your hourly workers who are saying, I want more, I want to get engaged, I want to get involved, it's a perfect storm. Mm-hmm. It's a perfect storm. And being one of the oldest institutions next to hospitals and universities, and schools, if we get it right, others will follow.
Thank you, Tyrone. I'm always so impressed with the work that you're doing and partnering with Mark and Malika, and they're seriously committed to this. And there's a difference between senior executive commitment and senior executive support. Commitment says, I'm engaged, I'm invested, I want to be a part of this, I want to help drive this. And support just means that sounds like a good idea. Go and do it and tell me how it turns out, right? They're not engaged and not fully invested. I know we're right up at noon Eastern time. I have the permission of my colleagues to stay on for about 15 more minutes. So for those of you who can join us, please stay on. We want to have more conversations. There's so much we could talk about, but we have set up to about 12:15 Eastern time. So if you can stay, please stay. But for those of you who have to go, may I please beg of you to please go to Amazon.com, pre-order the copy today. It's going to be out tomorrow. Here's where you can get it. It's on the screen there. Again, Amazon.com. And also, if you have your phones, we have a QR code for that. So you can just literally put your phone up to the screen. The QR code is coming up now, and you can just take a snapshot of it, and it'll take you directly there. Leave it up for about 5 seconds. And then the other thing I'm going to ask you, for those of you who are here today and you got some nuggets out of today's session and you are hearing some really good strategies and tips that are easily implementable, easily things that you can apply back on your jobs and in your roles, please go to Amazon and put a book review out. Now, it has to be put up tomorrow, not today. Amazon doesn't allow book reviews until it goes live tomorrow. But write out what you got from today, because it's all in the book. And I want you to put a great review up there, because we know that the more reviews up there, the book continues to proliferate. And we want to all be a part of getting this in every hand of every leader. So thank you for being here. For those of you who have to leave, again, follow me on LinkedIn, follow me on Instagram and Twitter and on YouTube. It's been recorded today, so this will be available for you to take a look at in the future, and also to allow others to view it as well. Thanks again for being here. So that's my commercial break. Back to our show, and let's talk about a few more questions, and then we're going to wrap up. Here's a couple of other thoughts. I wanted to, if you can, scroll back down. I saw really some good comments. I want to make sure I didn't miss any questions. So one thing I see too, one person says, for me, this is easier part of DEI because people are all unique and so interesting. They're interesting. Who wouldn't want to know more about all the different kinds of people we share the planet with? Absolutely. Someone else says polarization today can also be seen as an extinction model. When going extinct, organisms attempt to do anything, overproduce, and even do things that are against their own self-interest to survive, only hastening their demise. I see this in the pushback against DEIA initiatives. Dominant cultures and those that are in power see DEIA as a zero-sum strategy. So good. Such great comments. Again, just a lot of thank yous, a lot of excitement in the chat box. People are really agreeing with. Someone else says, as Wendy Lewis said, we all need to be cultural anthropologists, seeking out experiences with other groups and other cultures and break bread with others. It's the best way to lower barriers and to expand understanding. Love it, love it, love it. And people love the comment that I thought was so tweetable was polarization equals growing pains. And this work is all about us continuing to grow and to learn, and recognizing that none of us has the secret sauce and none of us has the corner on the market of everything there is to know about DE&I. We're all still learning ourselves. I'm learning new terminology and new language and new messaging and new strategy. So all of us are in this together. Here's another question, and we got two more and then we'll wrap it up. One is on remote and hybrid work, right? That's really changed the game, and it really has highlighted some things about the way we recruit talent, how we engage talent, how we retain that talent, how do you measure productivity? Why is it that it took an unprecedented pandemic to help some companies see the value of flexible and remote work? And what are some ways that you would recommend that companies or leaders really start to better engage with talent that they can't necessarily see now and touch in the office? With that DEI lens, thinking about it from that perspective. Why did it take a pandemic, first of all, to embrace flexibility? But also, what are some strategies or best practices that leaders can employ to ensure that they are being as inclusive, as respectful, and as equitable as they can to keep talent engaged?
Dr. Davis, I remember when initially we started to get information on the pandemic, or more specifically COVID, in terms of the results of people who were getting sick and dying, right? And I think it became very clear to us then, like never before, that this work is a matter of life and death. and that the results of some of those tragic things that we've lived through over the next 2 years have made evidence of that we are not the people we've claimed to be, nor are we very often as good as we hope to be, and there's been huge consequence of that. So I think it took the pandemic for us to get to that point because it shut us down. It shut us down. It turned lights off. And very ample and agile organizations found ways to not only work through it, and some was sustained, and some have even profited considerably from it. But I think it did have to be something as strenuous and heavy as COVID. I think it had to be something as characteristic as actually being a global pandemic, because no matter who you were or where you were, we were all in the same boat, and we were equally afraid, but equally maybe willing for the first time to listen for not only our survival, but to thrive and eventually, really surpass. So it did take the worst thing to happen for us to figure out the better we need to be.
And what are some strategies, Eric or Tyrone, you might want to jump in on this, strategies you've been employing now to, help consult with clients? I know Eric does a lot of consulting. Tyrone, you're helping to drive this in your organization and doing a lot of consulting as well. What strategies are you sharing about how to best leverage and engage and manage a more remote hybrid workforce?
Thank you, Dr. Davis. I just want to echo what Wendy said and support is that whenever there's a major disruption, there's money to be made and progress to be made.
Yeah.
If we go back over history and look at what happened during the civil rights and movement, where was growth? I mean, look at 9/11. There was companies that exist today that didn't exist before 9/11, and now we have the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd. So there's opportunities that we should focus on, and not the things that are not working well, but what can we do to harness that energy that's out there that people have that are more woke now than they've ever been to move the agenda further. So what it's doing is it's the whole thing is learning, taking resources and combining those resources, providing libraries for your organizations for people to tap into the books and materials and YouTube videos and white papers that they can go and read on their own. It's a lot of help people do self-reflection. We lean into the Intercultural Development Inventory, the IDI, to help people understand their own individual journey on diversity, equity, inclusion, and then for collectively as a group. And what I've done that has been very successful is I created a cross-cultural learning, cross-functional partner program. We've married people together based upon their results of the IDI and their opposite, whether it's race, gender, orientation, regional function. And we provide lessons, whether it's Dr. Mary Francis' book on Black fatigue or white fragility, vulnerability, books, articles, and YouTube videos for them to discuss one-on-one and bring them together collectively and have a fireside chat about those topics. This is what we have to do to get people engaged, involved, and to learn. People have been so vulnerable sharing. Just real brief example, one of our white leaders, a male, he said, I don't have privilege. I grew up, I was poor. He said, but after reading that article and looking at the video and having a conversation, I went in to buy a car. And I did not have my driver's license or any ID and still purchased a car and drove off. Knowing what I know today, that's white privilege that I didn't know I even had. So there's a moment of self-discovery that people have to start with themselves first. It's all about me understanding myself and what shapes my worldview. It's all about them, not from my perspective, but their perspective of how they view the world. And then how do we work collectively across our differences for all? And so I believe at Hyatt, we believe very closely. We solve for one that benefits all. So we're being inclusive, whether it's Me Too, Black Lives Matters, Asian hate, pride, trans. We want to make sure that we have a solution that will be equitable for everyone in the environment. But it starts with us first.
That's right.
What shapes my worldview? What am I doing that I could do differently? What can I learn? You said it best. As practitioners, we're still learning. We're defining in the moment. We're building the plane 50,000 feet in the air. Collectively, we have to do this together.
That's right. Good. Let me read a couple of other comments. We'll do one final question. And I want you to be thinking about just sort of your closing charge to those who are still here with us and those who will be listening in the future. What is the one thing that we want to make sure that we leave people with a food for thought, something to take action on, to be a part of the solution and not the problem? A couple of other comments. Thank you, Dr. Davis, to the distinguished panel, the wonderful nuggets of wisdom. It has been very impactful. Great panel, great presentation. Can you put up the code one more time? Yes, we will. Thank you so much for being here. Someone said they've already pre-ordered. I would again encourage you, please get this into the hands of all of your leaders. And please make sure that they now understand that this work is not for the chief diversity officer. It's not just for the HR professional. It's not just only for the chief administrative officer or the chief of staff. This is every leader's responsibility. So we want to encourage all of you to please ensure you get a copy of the book. The other thing too, for those of you who want to learn more about DE&I, you want to go deeper and broader. Someone was asking earlier, how can I learn more and get into this field? I'm just coming into it now as a young professional. We have a certificate of mastery for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And guess what? We're now using the book as our textbook. So we're going to spend 3 days with you, February the 9th through the 11th. For today, I know that we've now surpassed the early bird rate for those of you who are here today. And if you register before the end of this week, we will honor our early bird rate, although it's now gone up for more. We will honor the early bird rate for those of you who want to be a part of it. It's Cultivating Cultures of Inclusion and High Performance. It's virtual, so you don't have to worry about travel expenses and all of that. But we will spend quite a bit of the course going through this book. You will get a copy of the book as well as a part of the course if you register as well. We also do these inside of organizations. We've taken entire HR teams through it. We've taken entire leaders through it. And we've taken DEI councils, committees, caucuses, and all of that through this as well. So it's available for each of you. So let me turn it back over real quick to our distinguished panel, my brothers and sisters, in the words of the Dr. Janetta Cole, whom we all love and respect, my righteous brothers and sisters. What might be your closing thoughts and comments today for all of those who are listening in today, who've been very engaged, and we appreciate your time today, your investment of your own development. What would you say? Let's start with Eric.
Okay, I would just really tell leaders that so much of this begins with you and questioning your own core beliefs. One of the reasons why I think it took a pandemic for us to appreciate remote work is that there was a core belief that we didn't trust people to actually want to work, whereas a fundamental truth of human nature is that people want to work. They want to contribute. They feel better about getting a job well done. And so find it in your heart to appreciate people. And if your core beliefs don't allow you to do that, then you've got some work to do with you. It starts there and it continues through all the great strategies and recommendations that are contained within your book, which I have read. I have the privilege of reading the whole thing, and I'm going to tell everyone, before I leave, also buy the book. It's a great resource.
Thanks, Eric. And I'll go to Tyrone.
Just to leverage and borrow from a dear friend of mine, Candy Castleberry, each of us is given 24 hours to do what we will. We can do something good or do nothing at all. This session and this book is a great tool for you to leverage and learn. I encourage you to buy it, to do something good tomorrow for someone else, and to buy it for someone else and pass it out to other friends and your colleagues in your organizations and the communities so that we can do this together.
Thank you, Tyrone. And my dear sister, Wendy.
3 things, Dr. Davis and all. Number 1, buy the book, buy the book, buy the book. Number 2, in the Ally Shift work, we have a model called Pulse Check, with Pulse being an acronym for People United for Life and Liberty in Sustaining and Surpassing Equity. And thirdly, which is my hashtag and what I live by, is be wise, be willing, and be within.
Awesome. Closing comments from our distinguished audience. We just appreciate you. I'm sending you hugs and I'm sending you kisses and thanking you so much for your time today. Someone says, as a graduate of the Certificate of Mastery program, I highly recommend this. I've done other certificate programs, but this one is very comprehensive and taught by someone who has actually held the title of CDO and Master Yourself. Someone else says, very insightful, great panel. Keep it coming. We need more of these conversations and awareness and actions. Yes, please continue to follow me because I'm going to be hosting a number of these in my LinkedIn live show now, DEI Masterclass. I'll feature some other researchers, thought leaders, CDOs, and writers in this space. And we're just going to have these kind of frank conversations. So Thank you again all for being here. Don't forget to buy the book today. Do a review tomorrow. Go back to Amazon, do a review. And please, if you will, if you want to sign up for the Certificate of Mastery course, we're going to honor the early bird rate. You have been phenomenal. It is 12:15 Eastern time. I'm signing off, but I want to say to you to continue to be a part of the solution and not the problem, and recognizing that every single one of you has that superpower of giving of yourself, giving of your time, and giving to your organization the best of who you are, because there's only one of you. Thank you again. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the week. And again, happy true year. Be true to yourself this year and become a better version of yourself.
Thank you, Shirley.
And we're signing.